musical talk at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe. And we start today with a song for anyone who's ever been there.
You want a show in half an hour, 5-star reviews, sold out last year.
Well, we could do, we've nothing planned, we're rather blue, our show's been panned, but not if it's a magic show. If that's the case, then we'll forego.
I know my trade is very much maligned.
You're just a genre that we can't abide.
How about I try and make you more inclined?
I really doubt that you can turn the tide.
If I perform some magic and it works, will you see my show and tweet and like my page? Oh, I can make you see it even though you think it irks. A magic show performed upon the stage. Oh, I can make you see it even though you think it irks. A magic show performed upon the stage. All you do is take a lozenge here.
Oh, alright then, we'll join and play pretend.
This is magic, so there's nothing you should fear.
I think a fisherman has lost his friend.
Love when it works, and those you love will send you in a rage. Oh, I can make you see it even though you think it irks. A magic show performed upon the stage. Oh, I can make you see it even though you think it irks. A magic show performed upon the stage.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Musical Talk. I'm Thos Ribbits, the man about whom Kit Hesketh-Harvey once said he's very well informed. And that's not a joke, that's actually true. Well, welcome to this, another edition of Musical Talk, looking at some of the bits and pieces from this summer's Edinburgh Festival Fringe. And we started today with a song from one of the shows you could have seen there this year, which I think covers some things which anyone who's ever been to the Fringe would recognise. There really are a lot of magic shows. Well, that song came from a show with the very splendid title, the Gilbert and Sullivan improbable new musical, The Fringe Lozenge, and we'll be hearing rather more about that later in the programme. And today is, in its own way, thematically linked by musical theatre aristocracy. I don't think there's anyone who loves musical theatre who would deny that Stephen Sondheim is musical theatre royalty. And he is descended from a dynasty which, though he may not himself like it, I think most people would say began in terms of craft and quality at the hands of Gilbert and Sullivan. And they might not have got on personality-wise, but didn't they have a lot of children? And the third show we'll be talking about today is actually a musical about real British aristocracy. So there we are. It's all quality. A veritable Debrett's of delight. And it is to me a very sad thing that I'm the only Burke in this collection of peerages. We're going to start with Stephen Sondheim's peerless Into the Woods. One of my favourite shows, and it has been since I was a teenager when I first saw it in London at the Phoenix Theatre in, I think, 1987. And over the last 30 years, it's never really been out of the repertoire of performed musical theatre, and quite rightly so. It was this year's main production for the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, who put on a sparkling version, absolutely 5 stars, and I had the pleasure of sitting down with one of its musical directors, James Harrison, to have a genuinely interesting conversation about the musical aspects of Stephen Sondheim's Into the Woods. Now, as you probably know, Musical Talk at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe has to record its interviews on a slightly guerrilla basis, as indeed does almost everyone else doing something similar. You find a corridor or a doorway or a cubbyhole or an antechamber where you can catch a little bit of quiet in order to conduct a conversation. Well, unfortunately, James and I picked badly twice, and we ended up recording in 3 totally different places in the same building. So I'm afraid in this following conversation you will hear some changes to the ambient sound, and you'll be able to tell that that's the point after which we've just had to move somewhere else. However, none of that should detract from this conversation with the charming James Harrison. Musical Talk.
My name's James Harrison. I'm one of the MDs on the RCS production of Into the Woods this year, and the other MD is Robert Wilkinson.
Now, Into the Woods is a known commodity. It's been around, 30 years? 86, 87, something
Pretty
like
much
that.
30 years, I think, this year.
And it feels like a return to form. Maybe not return to form, but a return to home, almost, for the what I still think of as the Royal Scottish Academy, but is now the Conservatoire. Because 10 years ago, you were doing Company.
Yes.
At Sunday in the Park with George. Sondheim was very much... And these were Sondheim premieres in those days. Scottish Sondheim premieres.
Yeah, in the country.
Let's say Sondheim has gravitas, has bottom, as they used to say. And then for the last few years, we've had slightly lighter things.
Yes.
There was 9 to 5 and the Addams Family. You're in Town, which I know is has meaning, but also it does it in a lighter way.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with those shows at all, but the leap from 9 to 5 back to Into the Woods feels like a large one.
Yeah.
Your involvement is obviously on the musical side, but part of the collaborative creative team. Was this a deliberate policy, or was it just time to do a Sondheim again?
I think with the company that we have this year, with the 21 performers, there was a good, strong mix of acting, singing actors, as opposed to full-on dance musicals. So the combination of the time period, the people that were available to us this year, and I think because the film coming out a few years ago,
Yes.
we're still riding that wave for audiences that maybe wouldn't know it otherwise. So yeah, I think you're right, it was the right time to come back with a Sondheim.
I must say I'm very pleased because it's so nice to see the Conservatoire, which is such a great performing academy, doing good adult stuff. I mean, there's nothing wrong with 9 to 5, but it is a very different kind of a show.
They are different entirely.
It's harder to be genuinely moved, I think, by 9 to 5. But the piece itself, now, your skills, you're assistant musical director on this, and you conducted Act 1 very, very skillfully and deftly.
Thank you.
Deftly. But Sondheim is Sondheim is Sondheim. It's notorious in terms of diction issues and meaning, but it's no less a conundrum, a puzzle, an enigma, certainly a challenge in terms of its music. It's so... in a strange way, I suppose what I'd really like to ask you is, because the music comes out so beautifully, but it isn't seen in a sense, the orchestra here is behind a curtain upstairs. It's... People can easily say those actors have done wonderful things with tongue-twisting lyrics. Is there a sense... Well, I'm trying to work out the balance here between the difficulty for the singer and the difficulty for the orchestra and yourself.
Yeah,
I'm not phrasing that too well, but
I've done the show previously a number of years ago back home, so I slightly had an upper hand in that I knew the material relatively well. But yeah, through rehearsals, just the more prescriptive you could be, and I mean sometimes favourite quote is "the devil is in the detail," and you have to be precise. So when there were times where, because we double cast quite a lot of the leads, so someone would learn it one way, and then someone would think they've learnt it, and you have to reteach it because they've gone home and learnt the wrong rhythm or the wrong pitch. They thought they were obviously doing a good job getting ahead of the game, but then when you come to actually run it, you're like, well, no, you're not doing the same as this baker's wife, and it affects cues for 10 players.
yes, I suppose, because it is a two-way street, isn't it?
So
you're not just, forgive me, people sometimes think music is to support the actors, but it's an integral
No,
component in its own right.
There are so many moments where a very specific instrument cue, which has obviously been on piano for rehearsal periods, is now on a trumpet, a muted trumpet, and the sound has to be balanced well enough so that the cast member can hear it, know that's the cue, and then go on. Because if one person misses half a syllable, it's dominoed for the next person.
Well, the jumping on point seemed to be ridiculously difficult because, forgive me, I'm an incredibly old man, and I've been watching Into the Woods since it came to London in 1987 with Julia Mackenzie, and I've seen, like you, a number of productions, all of them brilliant in their own way. There's still new stuff to be seen, but I suppose the point I'm trying to make is, although I consider myself to be someone as a layperson who knows the score very well, and yet I still in my head I don't sing along in my head, but I know where I think the lyrics start, and the lyrics don't start where they think they do. They clearly start earlier, and I've been surprised by that several times today.
Good.
But my personal timing is all wrong, which is one of the reasons I'm on this side of the microphone rather than your side of the microphone doing the creative stuff.
Yeah, we. I think it was Michael Howell's, the director's, decision that it would be a slightly pacier version because it's a long show.
Oh yeah, well, Act 1 comes in at 1 hour.
Hour half,
exactly.
Which we had to get down to sort of hour 17. Yeah. So I think by the nature of Fringe, it had to be pacier
bang,
and
bang,
jumpier, bang, bang. So applause, segues, just go straight through. So yes,
the
surprises.
audience want to give you applause.
I know, and then you're holding it for as long as you dare,
and
then
go,
you've got to go because someone's come on stage.
Yeah. But I'd still like to go back to the difficulty for you then. I mean, as assistant musical director here and conductor for the first act. Where are the moments you dread? What are your personal potholes to avoid?
The opening section, the opening 15 minutes, because once it starts, it doesn't stop.
Yeah, that is a remarkably long opening number.
It's the longest continuous piece of music he's ever written.
Yeah. It's pretty much a record breaker for a show that's not an opera as well.
Yeah. Once it starts, once Upon a Time starts, you have to go. Yeah. And if someone... It's a runaway train. Yeah. So once that's over, I sort of sit back. After those first 60 pages, you sort of relax a little bit. But it's the smaller details. It's the catching the witch's spells, because the actress in question may elude a slightly longer spell, and you have to catch those moments as best you can. The smaller moments, the very timed moments. If someone stumbles, you have to jump and catch, and then you're out by a quaver, and it's quite noticeable. Just also because it's very sung through, and especially Act 1, it just goes.
Well, the narrator allows for that, doesn't it? By he not being the singing role, in a sense.
Yep.
And it does then allow everyone to just straight, he pushes the plot along, bang, bang, bang.
Yep.
So it's song, song, song.
And especially in this production, when he's on stage fully integrated, and it's sort of more his focus we're looking at. Yeah. Well,
should we talk briefly on that before we come back? I would like to explore what you do a lot more, because I'm only in awe of musical directors.
Oh, thank you.
Well, because you it seems to me that you create from the ether something remarkable, which, I understand words, I can work with words, you can tangibly see actors, but music comes... It seems.
Appears.
Yes, it does, yes. And obviously you are the genie through whom that all arrives. But let's talk about the production then a little, if I may. This is very clearly the modern interpretation, if we can now say that. It starts with the narrator is in the woods looking for his son. This seems to be something that's arrived in the last 5 years. Certainly the Open Air Theatre in Regent's Park did this.
Wonderful production.
You saw that too. Fantastic, yes.
Yeah.
When Dame Judy died.
Oh,
Dame Judy, wasn't she good? Even though she wasn't there. This is obviously paying sort of a tribute, or working on the original theories of James Lapine. I'm sure you know this. But he wanted the father of the baker, and the baker's son to be generationally connected. And that seems now finally to have been fused in, because there's always this hint, isn't there? That
it's alluded.
Yeah, that the narrator is in fact the son.
Yes.
Although the observation one has to make here is, from a feudal state to a 21st century state in one generation is a hell of a lot of progress. But this is theatre, I suppose.
Of course.
And there are some musical... it seems to me that one or two of the songs have been changed ever so slightly in lyric terms, and indeed I think in orchestration terms, to match this in The Last Midnight.
Yes.
The verse about... I was expecting the witch to be singing "You're So Nice." And of course that verse doesn't... She starts talking to the baby that she's holding in this case, the baker's child. And there's a completely new set of lyrics that I wasn't aware of. I'm not actually aware of how this change has become authorised.
Yeah, I think because, we're using the 2010 updated orchestrations, but I also think when it came to London, we were also doing Our Little World, which was put in for the London production.
That was written for the Julie Mackenzie performance,
yes,
in 87.
For the original London. So I think, I'm not sure, I think those alternate lyrics for Midnight were put in with the London show as well.
Crikey, that's interesting.
And they've always been an alternate, and I think it just worked for our production in terms of, because we're focused so much on the narrator's story, it was more prevalent to use those lyrics. And I think it gives the witch another layer of humanity. It just gives her another piece of magic to use against them. Because the whole show is children and mothers and fathers, so I think using that lyric, it gives it that extra air before she disappears. It's quite nice. And it was I think the two ladies that were playing the witches preferred those lyrics as well.
And these are perfectly reasonable, good dramatic reasons. I mean, let's talk about that song. Although the opener is such a remarkable opener, the thing in Into the Woods I think is so particular is the song where they're going for the blame, which then fuses immediately into The Last Midnight.
Yes, that is your 11 o'clock number, tear the house down.
And isn't it powerful? From squabbling to being told off, essentially, and being told a few half-truths.
Yeah, stand and listen to me.
Yeah, and it's done with such power. But there's real emotion in it as well. I mean, I'm underselling it even, I think, to be honest, but that is the moment when I find myself torn from my seat, if that makes sense, from your position, so close, because particularly Last Midnight is such to me, it's sumptuous, orchestrated and today played.
It is. I mean, those the Your Fault section, which transitions into Last Midnight. As soon as that starts, when Roberts begins, and we have the band, it doesn't. You can't stop.
No.
So you're waiting for it, and it is such especially in rehearsals, it's such a lovely payoff when it works. When everyone gets their line and everyone gets their scream at the right time, and then it suddenly just dissipates into this suspended witch. Yeah, it's a wonderful moment, and I think Robert might have said that's his favourite moment in the show, and he's worked on it with the actresses quite a lot to make a different style than what would normally be heard.
Robert here is...
Robert Wilkinson, the other musical director.
Thank you, just for clarification.
Yep.
That's not him, by the way, is it?
It's not.
Well, let me ask you a question further on the Last Midnight, which is that there is such suppressed emotion and anger from the witch in it. On this sort of, as I say, sort of glittering bed of music, which is so sort of, it's a beautiful, it's a waltz, isn't it?
It's a fast jazz waltz, effectively.
Yeah. And it would be lovely to hear a karaoke version of that, actually, enough, where you can hear the music. This is the danger, I think, so much that you with Sondheim you have to latch onto the lyrics to get the narrative and the cohesion, but it does also mean that you aren't there able to drink the music sometimes.
There's lots of lines, yeah. They get swept up, and especially because we're a reduced band for space, money, availability, we had to...
21st century considerations, I think.
It is. Yes. 3 keys covering most sounds, flute, clarinet, trumpet, cello, violin, percussion, bass. So we missed a couple of moments, but I think on the whole, the 10 players cover and create a glorious sound. And when you have those solo lines, they are just little nuggets that if you did come and see the show, 2 or 3 times and you knew it well, you could listen out for those moments of interest. And nothing he wrote was throwaway. So it's all related to something, all goes back, all connected around the 5 bean theme note, really.
Which is dum dum dum.
Da 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 dum. In some order, somewhere, always.
Did you know he made that his doorbell in the 1980s?
Of course, that's wonderful. I want that.
Yeah.
It's quite ominous, actually.
Well, I assume he had a door to put it on. He wasn't living in Rapunzel's castle. So.
No.
What has surprised you from your exploration of the score? It's interesting to me that you've already done it once before, so we can't have that many surprises. But being this up close and personal.
Yeah, actually, well, as part of our final project, we have to do one piece of written work. The whole course is practical, and there's one written assessment. And I chose to do mine on Into the Woods because it was the biggest thing we were doing at the time. I didn't want to have any other distractions, so I sort of sunk into the score.
There's no shortage of information on it.
Exactly.
Or joy to be had from it.
Yeah, and I did a more sort of a analytical study of why certain things are the way that he wrote them.
Oh, this is right up my street. Tell me.
Yeah, so in The Last Midnight, even just the key, he wrote it in F minor. There's lots of talk around sort of psychology and music, which I quite, and colours and music, which I quite like. F minor is just a bleak, dark, desolate kind of key. So when you go from that mayhem of Your Fault and it just then sits in this witchy waltz, I love the power of F minor. And then there's moments when Rapunzel...
You want a t-shirt with that written on it.
The power of F minor. And then when Rapunzel is singing in her tower, she's right at the top of her range in a glorious key. There's a flute accompanying her, and the synergy of orchestration and what's actually being sung, just how they mesh together, I find really interesting.
I'm fascinated by this idea of colour as well.
Yeah, it's called synesthesia.
This is where you see colours as you hear or
yeah,
experience music,
so I'd like to hear yellow when D major is occurring and greens around F minor because the pastoral kind of qualities they have.
It's just having a natural view.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I can't close my eyes and see rainbows, but certain keys and certain songs have connotations, and because Woods is so densely orchestrated, there's definitely something to latch onto. It's not just a sort of a 50s rock show.
No, gosh.
Yeah, there's lots of different colours, which I do like to hear. And it's really lovely when you talk to musicians, you can communicate much clearly what you're intending from them through a colour or a feeling, rather than trying to prescribe words to it, because you can associate so much more emotion with your mind's eye than you can telling them exactly what you want.
I do know what you mean by that, because I'm at the other end of the scale, because I say lyrics are where I enter the world first. I enjoy the music, but I can't do it, you see. But, funny enough, The Last Midnight is one of the very few songs where I do attribute a colour to it. It is a kind of midnight blues, so I've been led there by the lyrics. I'm fully aware of that.
Yeah.
But historically, and indeed in this production, you have the primary colour of Little Red Riding Hood in her primary red. I know the blue is also a primary colour, but the darker blues, the royal blues, the midnight blues, those blues are fused with darkness and black and subtleties and colours. It's almost violet in some sense. It's a shimmering, multi-coloured possibility. And that seems to me to represent her relative, this is the witch, her relative maturity compared to the original naivete of Little Red, for example. So I can sort of see this idea of colour representing so much more. Where are the other colour moments in the piece for you then, if you don't understand? I'm fascinated by your essay.
So in the additional song, The Our Little World, which I thought would be cut for time, but we managed to get it in, because it goes through so many keys in itself. I found it a really fascinating piece, and I don't think many productions put it in because of time. But it starts in this sort of C major quality, which is just pure and innocent, and everything's fine. And then when the two of them are singing together, we move into A major, which is brighter and redder and warmer and richer.
It's the little world they've created in that.
Yes, exactly. And then in the final chorus, where they actually agree that the only thing they really have in common is hair, we go into D flat major, which I think is such a rich and interesting key. And there's a lovely quote from a German musician psychologist in the sort of 1800s, mid 1800s, who stated that D flat major is a key only strange creatures sing in, yearning for things you can't have. And it just seems, whether Stephen Sondheim, he probably did, he's a very clever man, whether or not there's information out there to support
it's at least
his
footnote,
choices.
isn't it?
And then it just ends in this sort of bizarre key, and it's gone from C major, it's C major, D flat major, the closest on the piano, but so distant in terms of keys, and the ways he just manipulates through keys so deftly, and it's like the hair falling, and it just constantly moving forward. It's lovely. You never finish how you started. It's never cyclical. Nothing's ever repeated, and if it is repeated, it's twisted and altered.
That's the thing I always find very interesting as well, once again as a lay listener, that songs I know so well, there's quite often a sort of, I have no better term to describe this, so you'll have to sneer at my ignorance, but what I would call an arranging flourish. Always there for a point, and always there for a reason to generate some feeling. But obviously it doesn't happen on the first one. They're variations, aren't they? You have what would normally be, if you're taking a very standard idea of a song, you might have a verse, chorus, back and forth. When you get to the repeated thing, it isn't a repeat. There's so much more to it. Even making me think, why hasn't that gurgle appeared yet? Oh, that gurgle's turning up now. So, I use the word gurgle, by the way, because I'm thinking of the... this is a very different direction, but Three Little Maids from School from the Mikado has, do you know there's the gurgle in it, which I'm told was added not by Sullivan, but by one of a later orchestrator in the 20s, Isidore Godfrey probably, or someone like that, who, and it was considered to be so appropriate, they've kept it ever since.
And they've made it official.
But it's generally called a gurgle, I'm sorry. I don't think that can be right. But there's so many of those bits and pieces in it. But you said it so much better than I immediately. No song is in fact a repetition in any way.
No, even in sort of Agony, the most commercial sounding song is verse, chorus, end, finish, applause. Even
been done right.
Even in the reprise of that, it starts out the same, but it just goes into when the two of them sing their R's together. It just goes into this. For 2 bars, just this very, very, very strange, and then we suddenly come back into normality.
So where they're almost flaying themselves emotionally.
Yeah, and they're trying to outdo each other, exactly.
It's just,
but it comes out of nowhere. Yet it's created so beautifully, which is the magic, I think.
I'd like to talk once again about Into the Woods in a minute, but I'd like to learn more about you, James, because obviously you're here at the Conservatoire. Yeah. This is your last year.
Only year. So it's a 1-year master's course.
Oh, I didn't realise. I'm sorry. So tell me, and you've obviously done a lot of shows before, including Into the Woods. So, what is your history? How did you fall for music?
Well, I've always played. I started on clarinet, as a lot of young students do. I went through to the saxophone and then the piano when I was about 10, 11.
At the same time?
Yeah, I had all three on the go, and clarinet was my main instrument, and I went to Leeds Uni on clarinet.
Yes.
Then I started doing more and more musical theatre whilst I was at Leeds. Decided that I quite enjoyed that, and so then my piano took over, and my clarinet and saxophone have
Diminished a little.
diminished. I haven't picked up a clarinet in a while. So then I went to Leeds, graduated, and then when I came back to Leicester, I just kept teaching sort of private piano lessons, and then I got on good sides with a producer in Leicester who wanted to start a youth company that was a bit more focused than other youth companies, that did 2 full-scale productions a year, did dance shows, did exams. So I did that for 5 years, which is where I did Into the Woods initially. And then from that, I kind of started teaching more officially in colleges, BTEC colleges, musical theatre courses. And then I was doing that up until a year and a half ago. And then because I've always come to the Fringe, I always come to see the RCS shows. And then 2 years ago, I think it was the Urinetown production. I spoke to a woman who was on the course at the time, and she convinced me to apply. And I'd been thinking about applying for a while, but I wasn't sure how it would work. So I applied, got on, and then last year when I saw 9 to 5, I knew the next time I'd be here would be up in the gods. Yeah.
That's quite amazing, because it's interesting that you've been on both sides of the educational ladder.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense at all, does it? You've been on both sides of the educational threshold. How's
Yes.
that? Both teaching and being taught.
Yes.
That's fascinating that you're able to absorb and then release it back out.
Yeah, I think coming back into quotation mark education, even albeit at a master's level, there was a slight transition, but I think because the MD strand at RCS, they only take 4, 5 maximum. You're seen as, I wouldn't say middle management, but some kind of level between staff and student, because you work so closely with all 3 years and the master's students. So I think a lot of the time you are delivering teaching to students whilst also getting taught yourself. So there is a weird...
It's very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
But let's go back to that step where you found yourself doing musical theatre at university, then,
Yep.
and you realised your heart was there.
Yeah.
What were the other paths? I mean, did you did you see yourself as a rock star, pop star, or was musical theatre always waving to you slightly from behind the curtain?
Well, I applied to universities with English music joint honours.
Okay.
So I loved English. I thought my A-levels was a good pairing. Then at the 11th hour, I thought I don't want to do joint honours, it's too much.
Oh, right.
So I did straight music. But it's never not been music, which I'm really fortunate for. I can't consider another path now.
Oh, no. Well, you're very good, by the way, as well. So
Thank
you.
Yeah, I think I'm on the right track in terms of career and continuing. I'm not going to turn around and become a barrister, for example.
Or a barista, even.
Or a barista,
Yes.
well, maybe.
So, no, don't say that. Tell me, what next, then?
So we have our showcase. We have
Yes.
our final showcase on the 8th in Glasgow and the 12th in a venue in London, which is primarily for the performers to gain, employment
Get
or
agents,
agents. Yeah. But there's also a little scope for the MDs to, network and have a bit of a schmooze. So throughout the year, we've been talking to people and making connections. And I think now, especially halfway through the Fringe, is the time to cash in on them or send someone an email and hopefully try and get some ball rolling. And I think through David Hyam, who's our mentor on the course, he can aid and support these next sort of transitional months.
Because these are the hardest ones in a way, aren't they? I mean,
They
once you're
are.
on the course, you're on the course. But once,
It is,
yeah,
and
but
it goes so quickly because it's just a year with
Isn't it?
holidays as well.
Yes, it's an academic year at that. Isn't
Exactly,
It? It's
yeah.
fine. Although here you are in August, in fairness.
We
but-
do go through to
yes.
September
Yes,
because
right.
it is 1 year, but it's a full academic year. Yeah.
So, if you could pick any show, where are your favourites?
Like I say, it is Into the Woods.
Is it
which
really?
It's definitely up there. So when I did it 3 years ago, I was thrilled, and then when it was announced this year, I was doubly thrilled.
Someone's smiling on you.
Actually, another show which they did about 8ish years ago, they did Jerry Springer, the opera.
Yes.
I think that was the first RCS show I saw. I think that's just a wonderful work. I mean, it's it's not for all
No.
tastes, but in terms of the musical power it needs and the difficulty, it's up there.
It's a good complex piece.
It is, and in terms of lighter shows, maybe I like Shrek. I think Shrek's a lot of fun because it's got a good ensemble. The costumes are fun. It's a known story, and again, there are moments of quite nice musicalness.
Oh, you're blinding me with your expertise. Oh, here's an interesting then. What parallel can you draw from Shrek, which is the fusing of fairy stories into the
I
words?
didn't even notice that. I'm so ingrained.
Very different level, I think, but
Yeah.
and certainly musically more complex, I'd say, the one we've seen today.
Yeah,
But
I think because fairy tales pervade most cultures.
I was immediately going to say they're also a way of telling a truth, are they not?
Yeah,
Or at
exactly,
least
and
attempting to.
everyone knows some story from their childhood which they can associate and then see on stage. So I think, yeah.
It's funny, I was surprised today because, as I say, I've seen this show 1,000 times, not this production, which is marvellous, but the show. And yet I'm still finding fairy tale resonances which I hadn't previously seen. It had only recently dawned on me, but the witch's story is a variant on Mother Goose. Just the pantomime in
How
the sense.
interesting.
Well, Mother Goose is the
Yeah.
the aged woman who wants to get her youth back, and she does it. She goes into the Dingley Dell in the middle of the woods and bathes in the water, which make her young again. So
Yeah.
you've got the actual transformation into the young woman, but in her case, she loses what makes her the lovable Mother Goose character,
Yes.
which is she loses all her charm and friendliness, and she becomes materialistic and unpleasant. So she loses something in the process of the sacrifice you make for beauty. Is exactly what we see, and you don't realise it till you've made the sacrifice.
And then it's too late.
And then it's too
Yeah.
late. And what have we seen today? The witch has exactly the same trouble because she loses her powers
Yes.
to gain her beauty. And indeed, at the end, it's a sense, isn't it, that she has to surrender her beauty to regain her powers, if only to escape. Mother Goose is it's an odd fairy tale because it was written. It's only 120 years old anyway. It's not even an old folk story. It was created for Dan Leno, who was a British musical star.
For the
created
for the
exactly,
stage.
about 1900. So, but it's in the fairy tale range in this country.
Yeah.
I don't think it's widely done abroad. I mean, they have the
No.
Mother Goose character elsewhere, but
Yeah.
Mother Goose is, so it's probably something I'm overlaying on it, but it's still a children's fantasy story in the broadest sense. Just happens to be a modern one,
Yeah.
which I can see in here. I don't know if Stephen Sondheim's a great fan of British musical pantomime, but
I'm sure he writes lots of pastiches, lots of parodies.
he does indeed.
About musical form. So yeah, I'm sure he had some inkling of inspiration.
Let's go back to Into the Woods then. I mean, forgive me if I were to take you for a drink in 6 months' time and say, what are you remembering about Into the Woods? What do you think's going to stay with you?
The ensemble moments are small because it's mostly a solo lead show. Everyone's a lead, effectively. But
everyone's a lead. That's an unusual thing.
That is an unusual sentence, actually.
Yes.
But the ensemble moments, I think, especially when you have 21 strong voices, they're just wonderful. But also because we never hear the show, we never see the production, we just see a little monitor with the levels that we get in our ears.
And it's black and white as well, isn't it?
And it's about the size of a dinner plate. It's not massive. But I do love the ensemble moments because they're just so powerful, because they are so small. When they happen, it's this wall of sound, which I love. And because my colleagues I've been working with the past year, I'll have associations thinking about them as well.
Because you did Act 1 today, I've just been thinking, do you do Act 2 on other days? Or have you got into the habit of being the Act 1 man?
We were, myself, Robert and I, we were going to transition into full shows. But I think because both acts, especially Act 1, is tricky.
Yeah.
I think going into a full house show and having to conduct the whole show for the first time would be slightly daunting. But it also means that when we're not doing our act, we get to play keys one, which is great. I love pit work. I love playing.
So you're there for the whole performance?
Yes, we're there. I think we dovetail really well, and
I don't think anyone could tell that there was any difference. I mean, to me, it all seemed absolutely cohesive as a piece. I mean, I can't think how I might improve today's performance.
Oh, thank you.
Certainly the orchestra was absolutely spot on. As far you can tell me I'm wrong, but certainly it sounded perfect.
No, they're a really great group of guys. They follow and listen, and it's really wonderful.
I didn't spot a stumble anywhere. So, James, how can people contact you if they want to do so?
I have a Facebook page, James Harrison, with my beautiful headshot stand there.
It's what people would see if they were watching you on a TV monitor on stage.
Exactly,
fact,
yeah, exactly that. I'm starting to get a full website going, but James Harrison, musical director through Facebook.
Musical director of hire.
Indeed.
Well, James, it's been wonderful talking to you. It's such a wonderful insight to speak to someone who seems to move so effortlessly through something I adore but I cannot understand or comprehend. Music is a beautiful thing that lands on my lap. How it gets there, I don't know. And now, for you, I can see that there's so much work, so much complexity and so much intelligence that goes into it.
Thank you.
I wish you great success, but thank you for a wonderful performance.
Thank you.
Musical talk. There we are, James Harrison there, one of the musical directors of Into the Woods in Edinburgh this year. And I can only applaud the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland for returning to its Sondheimian roots. Well, what next? There was something that purported to be a new Gilbert and Sullivan operetta at the Fringe this year. Entitled, knowingly, Gilbert and Sullivan's improbable new musical, The Fringe Lozenge, it proved to be a delightful confection of Gilbertian ideas and plot points married to Sullivan's music to create a brand new musical piece. Not quite a Savoy opera in its own right, but it was an absolutely delectable slice of a Gilbert and Sullivan sponge cake, liberally covered in jam and cream. I think I've pushed that about as far as I can go, so let's get on with it. In a minute you'll hear an interview with the woman behind it, Sue Ellaby, but first we'll hear the opening number, in which the show sort of sets out its stall. I hope you enjoy this song and the conversation that follows about the Fringe Lozenge.
Welcome to our latest Fringe show, G&S, as you may know, liberties with the libretto scores not being impinged. Sullivan for music, glorious skill, despite our meritorious for this topsy-turvy show located at the Fringe. Welcome to our latest Fringe show, G&S, as you may know, liberties with the libretto scores not being impinged. Liberties with the libretto scores not being impinged. There are only four of us in changing parts. We'll try and make it bigger class. We're happy to divulge it plan unhinged. Sullivan wrote music, glorious skill, despite our meritorious for this topsy-turvy show located at the Fringe. So sit back, enjoy the journey, recognise some things you made and copyright says our attorney has not been infringed.
Hi, I'm Sue Ellaby and I've just directed the Quality Art Theatre with the Fringe Lozenge.
But you've done more than just directed, haven't you? You've actually been the creative force behind it. So let's talk briefly about how if you were pitching this show to be produced by someone else, how would you describe it?
Oh,
Because it's a lovely confection, if I may say, a souffle.
an interesting question. I think what it is trying to apply the Gilbert and Sullivan formula to something in the present day, and the Fringe just lent itself to a topic that you could apply a bit of a Gilbert and Sullivan spin on. And it has I hope it has all the elements of Gilbert and Sullivan, mix-ups, abandoned babies, love at first sight that can never be, sense of duty, and then at the end everything comes together in an implausible finale. Yes. And it lends itself to all the silly dances. But I think possibly what I'd also describe it as is, if you just wanted an hour of uplifting music, we haven't tinkered about with Sullivan's music at all, and so an hour of Sullivan's music is going to please anybody, whatever the show's about. So that was my sort of full black comfort blanket, that whatever the show was like, they'd enjoy the songs.
Well, in fact, you actually you have a kind of, there's almost an overt sort of a manifesto in the first song, isn't there, that we don't touch Sullivan's music.
No.
We have tinkered a bit with Gilbert.
Yeah.
No copyright has been breached.
No, liberties with the libretto, scores
Yes.
not being impinged, that's fine, yes. So we kept faithful to the score.
So how did you come up with the idea? When and how did the idea come to you? Because I love these. There is a small genre of Gilbert and Sullivan-esque shows where people take
Right. Yes.
bits and pieces and fuse them together. And I should mention that there's
was Gilbert and Sullivan the musical a few years ago, which you have a family connection with.
Yes, I do, yes. And I think possibly that was where the idea germinated. So when I saw Gilbert and Sullivan the musical, I was a bit sceptical about anybody taking the liberty of changing anything about Gilbert's lyrics, because I just thought, sacrilege, how could you do that? And it worked so well. That was Sitting Duck Theatre, which I enjoyed that so much. I thought, that's what a great idea.
And then, it doesn't diminish the original because they're still there.
Yes, and I think if you conceive that it's also done with affection for Gilbert and Sullivan, it works.
Oh, it's not mocking. Yeah.
No. So I was surprised at how much I enjoyed that. And then it was 2 years ago, I just had this idea of a Cox and Box idea for having a flat at the Fringe. And I sat down and started scribbling out some ideas. And I had 2 weeks where... for various reasons, I had a 2-hour gap every afternoon, and I thought I'll just sit down and see what I can do.
A writer's dream.
And I have to say, it was so it wrote itself really. Once you look at the elements of G&S and say, oh well, if it's the Fringe, this will happen, that'll happen, then you think I need a patter song, I need a chorus song, I need a good opener. It had to be the Patience finale because I love that. And then the words just really, you can just mirror what Gilbert did with where the rhymes are, where every syllable it has exactly the same number of syllables in every song as Gilbert's.
It scans.
So that it works.
Metrics, as Sullivan used to describe.
Oh right, okay, yeah.
He used to praise Gilbert's metrics as being the best he ever worked with.
Oh, okay, I unashamedly copied all.
Well, you're copying from the best. But coming up with the idea is one thing. As I say, I love the fact that you actually then spent some time thinking about it, chewing it over.
Yeah.
But then it's still quite a different idea from having it on paper and then actually saying, how do I get this on in Edinburgh? So, because as I say, you're creative in the sense of writer and you're the director, so a lot of this is resting on all your shoulders.
Well, and producer and choreographer, and yes. But so then last year at the Fringe, I'd penned most of the songs. A couple of extra ones came in later, and last year I was up at Edinburgh, got caught up in the Fringe, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to do it. Yeah. So I thought that space venue, Theatre 3, was the ideal. I wanted an end on stage because that's what a Gilbert and Sullivan lends itself to, and I wanted somewhere central that would be comfortable for what I imagine the audience like it to be. And I spoke to the director of the space, and he said, well, why not here? And I there and then booked the venue. And then
really?
After that moment at last year's Fringe, I thought, right, I've got to do this now. So then I wrote the dialogue bits in between the songs, and then I just advertised for a cast, and then we took it from there.
So let's talk a bit more about the narrative. Without giving anything too much away, you've mentioned Cox and Box, but what I like the fact you take quite a lot of Gilbert's twists here and there and you fuse in a fugue, actually. There's a kind of fugue of Gilbertian plot devices, which actually fit really nicely together. There is actually a narrative cohesion to it, which you might think wouldn't be the case.
Okay.
How did you always think that was going to be the way, or were you what were the hooks you wanted to build your plot on, and did it turn out the way you thought it was going to? You do describe any of the plot if you want to.
It turned out far better than I thought it possibly could have done, actually. And I think what I just sketched down on some paper were the Gilbert elements that you need, the abandoned baby and all of that. Then I sketched down things at the Fringe that you might want to poke fun at. So the patter song about the reviewer, I really enjoyed writing that and just think, what are all the phrases? Let's string them all together.
There is some truth in what you've said, I'm sad to say. Yeah.
and I suppose I thought a little way, you are poking fun at the Fringe, aren't you? And you're making people think about the Fringe. But I can't say there was anything particularly clever about the plot. It just all seemed to fall into place, really. And then the cast brought it to life, and I was just so happy to see it on the stage, really.
So how did you pick? Because you've mentioned already that some of the Sullivan music that you used to bed the lyrics were your particular favourites. You said you were going to have the Patience finale. I like the fact you started with the very opening of Trial by Jury, which for a lot of people is the first bit of Gilbert and Sullivan on the canon. I mean, we're excusing Thespis here on the grounds of no longer being with us. Although I did enjoy
we did have a little bit of music from
there's a little bit of Little Maid of Arcadia is a musical link, isn't there? It's rather lovely, I thought. So how did you pick the music? Did you just think...
Some of the songs just automatically fell into place, like Soko Coco, which is one of the characters. When they're welcoming Soko Coco at the Royal Mile, that Soko Coco from Gondoliers. I mean, it just had to be that, didn't it? Really. So
fits so perfectly.
So I just basically surrounded myself with scores, looked at all the songs that were there, and thought, oh, that one will fit for the patter song. That one will fit for this. That one. Oh, what can we have from Ruddigore? And you think, oh, it's got to be, When the Night Wind Howls. Where would that fit in? And so there was a bit about picking the songs that people would recognise, and then thinking, well, how would that fit with the outline of the script? And fortunately, managed to get a song from everyone in there. And I also thought, I've got to have a patter song, I've got to have a love duet, I've got to have a quartet,
yes.
I've got to have the male duet solo. So there are certain elements that you think you've got to have those in, and then which are the best ones from each, well, in my view,
yes.
of each of the operettas, which one shall I use? I've used one from, Mikado, I can't use another one from that, I'll have to pick one from Gondoliers. And it was an absolute joy to write. That was the easy bit, writing it.
Oh, was it really?
That was the easiest
Not
thing,
everyone
I think.
says that.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So I take it you had an idea of what the kind of song was going to be about, in the journey that it was going to describe. Then you pick the music, and then you fit the lyrics to the music. You have to do it that way.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you are using the reverse Gilbert technique, of course.
Yes, absolutely, yes. And what I also did, so I sat with a score in front of me, and then I worked out where Gilbert had put the rhymes in, which isn't always where you imagine.
No.
So, for
it's
example,
much more complex than people think.
yeah. So with The Magician, where it's John going, well, I can make you see it even though you think it irks. The works that it rhymes with is actually just one of the earlier lines, and it's not reflecting the line that went before or anything. So I just mirrored exactly what Gilbert had done, and yes, I hope he's not turning in his grave.
Did you? I mean, it's interesting. You've also made that observation by studying it. Did you learn anything else about Gilbert's craft?
Just how amazing it is, really, and how beautiful some of the lyrics are. And also Sullivan, of course, what lovely, lovely melodies that even if we put daft lyrics to them,
yes.
that it still sounds beautiful, doesn't it? Yeah.
It does. I mean, well, I'm a fan, so you don't need to convince me. But now I'm going to ask you about who you thought you were pitching it at, because it is a rich brew. Yes. Well, let's be honest. I am a fan, an aficionado of the entire canon.
Yeah.
I've already made a Henry Lytton joke to several members of your family before we even started recording today. So, for the people who know, that's a little bit off the beat. But I went with a friend of mine who likes GNS when he's seen it, but by no means would describe himself as a fan particularly.
No.
And he enjoyed it as well.
Yes.
But I did turn to him afterwards and said, how much of that did you get? And he said, well, I got the story and the plot.
Yeah.
I understood that they were using Gilbertian elements,
Yeah.
but he didn't get all the jokes.
No.
And I'm going to say one of the jokes. There's a fantastic, I mean, there's a pretend homage to, there's a suggestion that there's an A.A. Milne themed pub in Scotland called the Pooh Bar.
Yes.
And you can hear at least a number of the audiences going, when they hear that, because they get the Pooh Bar reference, which for people who don't know, Foolish You is a Mikado character. But the whole thing is full of references, quotations, jokes, borrows, steals, let's be honest, in it. So you always thought this is going to be much more fun for someone who's got stronger knowledge.
Yes, and what I was trying to achieve was a show that would really appeal, I suppose, to someone like me who knows GNS, would get the references, the what an elbow, those sorts of gags. But also, if somebody knew nothing about GNS but knew the Fringe, they'd get all the Fringe gags, because there are some Fringe gags in there which if you weren't a Fringe goer, you wouldn't get.
No.
If you're a GNSer, never been to the Fringe.
Yeah,
so
you normally go to Buxton rather than Edinburgh.
So it was to
or
try and appeal to both audiences, and I sort of thought there'll be a GNSer who wants to come and they'll drag the partner along, and at least they'll follow what's going on. So that was sort of my target audience, really. Yeah.
Well, you did make. You mentioned it already. There is a kick in the pants for those of us reviewers who rely on repeated phrases over and over again. But that's fair, because there's an awful lot of citizen journalism here in Edinburgh, and it is of a variable quality. I mean, you make a joke about I've never done anything before. I have no knowledge of theatre. Yes, of course I'll review it.
Yes.
I've spoken to enough directors and producers and performers to know that that's true. And you make just a very quick reference to how the price of drink is phenomenal. More than it is on the South Bank of London. And there were knowing laughs, weren't there, all the way through.
Yeah.
I mean, people have taken to this very positively. You've sold out. You could hear the audience appreciation today.
Great response from the audience, yes.
So what have people been saying to you?
Very slick, very clever. They enjoyed it. Their best Fringe show they've seen. It's just been. We haven't had anything negative really. One negative thing was there was a bit of a joke where we say, "What is life without a nice hot cup of tea in it?"
Yeah.
That sometimes gets a laugh at that line, and then we go into. I thought you can't do GNS without Hail Poetry in there, and somebody came up who was absolutely distraught that we changed the lyrics to Hail Poetry, and I can understand that perspective, but that was the joke really. That you throw a Hail Poetry in a completely unexpected, doesn't really fit in the plot, but what beautiful music.
But also, if they've got, because that's towards the end of the piece.
It is,
Right
yes,
at
yeah.
the end, it sort of launches the finale in a
Yes,
way.
yes.
And you think, well, you've got that far, and you don't mind the lyrics being
a bit of a
tweaked,
joke.
shall we
Yes,
say?
yes,
It's quite.
yeah.
It's, I think it's delightfully light.
Yes.
It's delightfully funny.
Yeah.
As you say, musically, it has nothing to worry
No,
about.
no.
And I love the cohesion of the plot. I think it works really
thank you.
nicely together. As I say, that was the joy of it, and it's particularly difficult with a Gilbertian fugue, because you also do have to have, we're going to use, everyone now uses the term topsy-turvy, thank you, Mike Lee, and that's right, but it slightly undersells it. It's a strange way. Gilbert has this thing of sort of building up his impossible world, and then he has to turn it upside down, and it suddenly all makes sense.
Yes.
So it's not just topsy-turvy, it is actually literal inversion.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose you could argue it's very similar.
Yes, yeah.
But that's quite difficult. It's difficult to design a fugue upside down, I suppose, is what I'm saying.
Yes. The other interesting thing about the Gilbertian, the references to GNS, was that none of the cast at all had seen anything other than one had seen a couple of GNS shows. So none of them are GNSs.
You're joking, really?
No. So they were saying, one of them actually said to me, "Is there a poo bar in Edinburgh?" And I had to explain, no, that's the joke. Or why am I saying what an elbow? And so it was quite funny that none of them got any of the jokes. And I thought that was good because they delivered them just
Deadpan,
straight. They weren't waiting for the laughs.
You can't mug a joke if you want it to succeed.
No,
so
so that worked to my strength. Although
ignorance created bliss, you see.
But it created a lot of tension for myself, thinking, are the audience actually going to get this and laugh? But when they did, the cast were absolutely amazed. Why are they laughing at this line? They'd be saying, that's great.
So what was your favourite gag? Is there something you're particularly keen on? I mean, I do love "What an elbow." It's such an odd thing to say anyway, isn't it? Because it's catchish as...
Yes, I like...
We didn't get the shoulder blade in either then.
No, you can only have one, yes. I like the... what sandwiches do you have? Eggs jam, strawberry jam, eggs jam, but nobody really got the sausage roll joke. But I've kept a couple. But only a couple of real GNSs got that. And I loved the fact that Jack and Elle see the street entertainers were at the Fringe, and that was sort of a bit of a running theme through it. But again, not everybody got the more subtle GNS references.
And
but
that's obviously, so.
when I saw somebody smile at some of those, I felt quite pleased with that one. Yes.
I suppose GNS fans also come with different levels of knowledge. You can just appreciate what you've seen and really like it, and have some knowledge. And then there are, those of us who collect rare Walter Passmore recordings from 1912 or something like that, which are all available on iTunes, everybody. So, I think it's a lovely show. I would give it 4 stars, if I may.
Thank you, Thos, thank you.
I say a souffle, I think, is the best description of it.
Thank you.
My sadness is that I saw it on its last performance. My only hope is that it might go somewhere else. Is there any chance?
I think let's just get this show out of the way and then just reflect on what's happened. But it's been a great Fringe experience for everybody.
And do you have a difficult second album in you?
I have got a second show in my head, but whether this would translate, I don't know. Another GNS with a twist.
Please, well, in which case I'll see you in about 3 years, and we'll talk about it again, if I hope.
All right, thank you.
But seriously, thank you so much for talking to me, and
thank you.
It's a wonderful show.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You, a director though, you must be so excited.
Not really. You see, I'm not very keen on theatre.
Why are you here then?
Well, you may not understand this, but I am the son...
Please ensure all seatbelts are fastened for takeoff.
I am the son of...
Please ensure all hand luggage are placed under the seat in front of you.
The only son
Cabin crew prepare for takeoff.
So
Well, I don't see what difference that makes, Ralph.
It's Rafe, the L is silent, and Schwenk's my middle name. My parents are both in the biz, and therein lies the blame. They forced me into theatre, that I could study maths, but on drama they insisted, and they chose my career path. Their so-co theatre troupe is doing rather well. They need a new producer, and I'm lined up for that hell. To real theatre lovers, it's utopian, I'm sure. For mathematic buffs like me, I find it such a bore, but my duty's clear.
Well, why don't you just tell them? I'm sure they would understand. You're such a lovely person, maybe I could lend a hand. I'm going to the Fringe to work at venue 17. I'm here and I'll support you, and let you in for free.
No, I'm sorry you don't follow, I couldn't possibly. Though your right elbow's perfect, it's your ranking, don't you see? As son of so-co, our Fringe status gap is wide. To date a venue worker, it would hurt my parents' pride. So my duty's clear. My duty's clear.
there we are, some dialogue which really showed up some of the Gilbert and Sullivan jokes, and another song from Sue Ellaby's rather splendid Fringe Lozenge. And it's a continuing delight to me that over the 11 Edinburgh Festival Fringes that I've been to, there nearly always is something Gilbert and Sullivan related, which I think is only appropriate at the world's biggest arts festival. Well, the last show we're going to be talking about today is one that actually came up last year and was so successful it sold out. And so it came back again. And it was called How to Win Against History. And it tells the story of a very unusual British aristocrat at the turn of the last century, who was, by all accounts, a very unusual man with a love of cross-dressing and theatre. I saw the show again this year, and it was again a fantastic 5-star production. Well, although sadly he wasn't at the Fringe this year, you may recall that I sat down with Broadway Baby reviewer and friend of this programme, Josh Clark, to discuss How to Win Against History last summer. So I thought it would be instructive and appropriate to hear that little conversation and review again. And so here it is, that conversation between me and reviewer Josh Clark. Musical talk.
Well, here we are again, Josh, for our annual conversation and roundup of some of the best and otherwise musicals of the Edinburgh Fringe. Now, of course, you're here in a professional capacity, so it's my privilege to talk to you because, you are an official observer of so many of the productions up here in Edinburgh.
Yes, once again, thank you very much for having me on, and nice to be maintaining that official capacity for the second year running. So I'm starting to feel like I know what I'm doing now.
Oh, your stuff is highly readable, and I would strongly recommend people go and look for your name, Josh Clark, on Broadway Baby. Broadway
Baby, that's right. In this official capacity, I do use Joshua. So
do you?
Yeah, you probably have a bit more luck using that. But
I'm sorry, Mr. Clark.
That's fine.
However, you and I have been between us to a fair number of shows, many of which were musicals, some of which we've both seen, although not at the same time, and some of which I've seen and some of which you've seen, and the other one hasn't. So I think this is a fantastic opportunity for us to sort of wander around our memories and see what comes to the top. But I was going to suggest we actually start with a show that I know we've both seen and we both thought was rather good. How to Win Against History.
Yes.
Would you care briefly to describe the show?
Yes, I can do. And I'll just start off by saying that actually this year it's been, for me, the pick of the Fringe entirely, musical theatre or just regular theatre, and it's one that I gave a rare 5-star review to.
Good lord.
But I could well have given it 6. I thought it was so good. So a brief synopsis. It uses some historical material, although some material that you'd really have to dig deep to find, about a guy called Henry Paget, who lived around the turn of the century, late 1800s, I believe, who was the 5th Marquis or Earl of Anglesey.
Marquis,
wasn't it? Yeah, 5th Marquis of Anglesey. So a grandly titled fellow who came into the family wealth and promptly squandered all of it, I think within 5 or 6 years, living what they call in the show a rather fabulous life, full of sequins, if his costume's anything to go by, and was a cross-dresser, unusual for the time. So
a heavy implication that he was a gay man.
Yeah, despite having his wife, although that was more of a...
Yes, well, Oscar Wilde managed that one as well.
Exactly, so. It's more of an arrangement of convenience for both parties there, wasn't it? And I suppose it's really a sort of biopic or bio-theatre piece, bioplay.
Bioact.
Bioact of this very interesting figure.
Yeah, now I agree with you. I think it was a remarkable piece, and in its way is really exploring what it is to transgress society's rules, particularly at periods that we would now look back on as fairly regressive, and being yourself. It's a message that's been up here a lot, actually, in a lot of shows I've seen this year. The two themes which are coming out are be yourself and carpe diem, get on with it. And this one certainly is in the be yourself mode. Yeah. So, as you quite rightly say, he lives the kind of life which anyone who knows anything about British history would be aware of from the beginning, i.e. he's an aristocrat, he goes to Eton and hates it, fags and all that kind of stuff, which is, for people who don't know the British argot, is to sort of, when junior members of the school sort of act as servants to the senior members of the school. Let's just clear that up. But he very quickly realises that's not for him, and his true self keeps coming through. And as you say, he inherits so young this remarkable wealth. But then it's about, yes, as you say, it's doing what he can to be who he is. I mean, there's a beautiful framing device in the piece, isn't there, that his sort of best friend is an actor that he hires to help him put on his theatricals, because that's what he's all about. Spending a lot of money and putting on shows, and nobody comes. But he takes them on tour. In fact, they say if the mountain won't come to Mohammed, Mohammed must go to the mountain.
Yes, they eventually got to that, didn't they?
Yes.
There's a bit of a running gag about that one. And yeah, as you say, his friend is there, and he's almost, even though he goes along with all of the plans and routes, he's almost the voice of reality, isn't he, in the corner, this figure that is there trying to ground the Marquis, even though he's not really successful in doing so.
Well, actually, yes, I suppose because the character, he's a kind of fruity actor, isn't he? He's not, I don't think he's not portrayed as being a good actor, if I may say. I mean, the actor playing him is excellent, but he's not playing a good actor.
Yeah.
And actually, at one level, you can see that almost as a bridging character, because he has the true business aspect of a businessman, which is what show business is. But also, he has the other foot in the camp of the artifice of show business, particularly at the fruitier end of it. So he knows how to straddle reality and make-believe in the way that the Marquis actually doesn't. And indeed, by the time he's doing avant-garde dance in Berlin, a bit later on in the piece, you sort of get the impression that the Marquis is completely... He's so far being himself and so far transgressed from society, but he hasn't even got one foot left in the camp. Wearing a jacket is for him, a gentleman's tweed jacket is for him painful almost. So he's like a hot air balloon, which is glorious, but has disappeared into the firmament so completely, never to be seen again, or so it seems to me.
Yeah, he's really become a complete caricature of himself, hasn't he? And it's as though he's taken on certain characteristics or even affectations at a younger age, which have then just grown and grown, and he perhaps himself has come to find it difficult to separate his true self from almost the character that his life has become.
Yes, you're right, it is partly about image. I suppose the question is, how sincere is the Marquis in being who he is? Because there is towards the end of his life, by which time he's bankrupt and he's living in exile in Monte Carlo, there's a sort of an interview with, I think it's a Grub Street Daily Mail journalist of the worst kind. Well, that's at least how it's portrayed, rather amusingly, I must say, whereby he pretends to be, and I'm putting speech marks around this, normal. That's where he puts on his tweed jacket, and through fourth wall breaking a size to the audience, he makes it plain he hates it, but he's doing it in order to develop some kind of... Well, is it to rehabilitate his own reputation, or is it to give himself some kind of armour to protect himself? I don't have an answer to that.
It could be either, really, couldn't it? But it's... With that little device of the newspaper, it's the image that he thinks he is expected to put across, isn't it? Almost. And that he's perhaps fearful of what other people would say or think if he were to put himself out there in quite such a public way as being who he wants to be.
And who he wants to be, or who he actually is. I think that's the other question. I'm still pondering that one myself as well. There's I think we need to put this in the context of the title, though. How to Win Against History. He has essentially been shunned by society. He's rich enough to ignore society, and he does, until the money runs out, and then society has its way with him, if you like. And when he dies young, at 29, I think it is, the family burn almost every record of him. There's almost nothing left to history of him. He leaves no footprints in the sand, except one extremely sneering obituary, which is quoted in full. And the actor playing him is such a sort of gentle soul, or certainly playing him as a gentle soul, and so he reads out the obituary, which really is a horrible one about him, and he says, well, there is that, that is my epitaph. But then but through the play, you get to see that he's living life the way we assume he wants to live life, and then as he dies, isn't it? He has this kind of death on his own terms. And he says, this is how to win against history. I sort of won against history, because at least he died the man he was, rather than the man he was being required to be. Did that work for you?
It sort of did, because I think it is there just at the end that we do see this fragility in his character, and almost this first element of self-doubt about who he is, because just as he's saying, I almost won, there's this really strong repetition of, I was a cross-dresser, I am a cross-dresser, and it's that element that really came to the fore right at the end, wasn't it? Much apart from all of anything else that he did. And so perhaps there's something about, well, as you say, it's almost his sexuality is the key thing there, rather aside from how he presents that.
Yes, because even within the gay world, he takes a fairly extreme position for the Edwardian era, an
Yeah.
excessively strange one. Although, of course, he is in that period of the avant-garde, which actually does allow a little bit more leeway than we remember.
Right.
There's also the vorticists in art and all this kind of stuff as well. People deliberately breaking convention. So there's no reason why, as an artist, which is how he portrays himself, you wouldn't also do that in your life. But these are highfalutin ideas.
Yeah, and I suppose equally that ending could just as well be him grasping to convince himself that actually his life has had some meaning at all. And I was a cross-dresser. That is an achievement in this time. Remember this.
Well, you're right. I mean, so I suppose I've got to ask you the question: is this a tragedy?
Oh, is it a tragedy? Well, I suppose in the classical sense, we'd be looking for some sort of heroic figure with a tragic flaw, wouldn't we? I'm not overly sure there's too many
He doesn't fit that mold,
heroic
really,
elements,
no.
not so much. It's tragic in the sense that I think you do get a strong feeling of affection and warmth for the figure and how he's presented.
He's very empathetic.
Yeah, absolutely. And so by the end, I think there is a genuine pathos for his
That
demise.
might be a better way of putting it.
Yeah.
And also, as you quite rightly pointed out, it is when he dies that he shows his strength of character. Because in a way, he's actually a little bit... Well, he sings a song called Electric Butterfly or something, doesn't he? Which is as much a reference to who he is and what he's doing and how he's being as anything else. So he's quite this ephemeral character. And then suddenly the steel comes out at the end, I think. So I think, actually, I don't think it's a tragedy. I think... And also, of course, we're invited to look at it with 21st century eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, the villain, the big bad in the piece, is Edwardian society. We now look back on the family and think, how dare you destroy all records of this man who was the actual Marquis.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's a musical.
It is a musical, and I think the music's superb, really.
Well, I was going to say yes. Now, do you think it being a musical is something that actually enhanced the piece?
Yeah.
I can tell yes, but, but why?
Well, I think for this sort of character, it just works completely, and it's one of those shows where you could almost genuinely accept that this man lived his life through song.
Yeah, well, yes.
And so, even though it's very over the top, and a lot of the music has been written with a very knowing nod to certain styles of commercial musical theatre, it does work.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I think, and it moves through...
It might be a stew, but it's a very tasty one.
Absolutely. And it even moves through different styles of music. There's lots of very upbeat ones, but there are also, I suppose, to bring us up to the end point, there are ones of more reflection and thoughtfulness, almost.
Well, yes, it meets... There are a number of styles, but it also meets a number of emotional situations. But the thing I think, and neither of us really mentioned this, is that it is also undoubtedly an out-and-out comedy with tragic or pathetic elements in it, and in some cases pathetic elements. But it's a comedy. It's a three-hander essentially. There's the actor playing the Marquis. There's the actor playing the actor.
Yep.
And then, and by no means third, there is a very tall gentleman who's resplendent, who's dressed as a kind of footman, who plays the piano and is therefore the musical accompaniment, but also performs in roles. I mean, there's a lovely moment, by the way, when we get a sort of sub-Dickensian moment where we have two ghosts visiting a young Marquis, telling him he's really got to go off and do something and be the man he is, actually. And the two of them together make a very, if I may say, very comedic set of phantoms.
Yeah, absolutely. Between the three of them, they slip in and out of harmonies instantaneously, and they're absolutely spot on. It's a very tightly polished piece, isn't it, in every sense, actually.
It is, and yet, I recognise the gentleman, I don't know his name, I regret, but the gentleman who's playing the piano, I recognise from a number of shows over the last few years. Certainly last year, and he may even be doing it this year because it's up here, or at least one of the variants of it is, there is, and you're part of my language, there's something called shit-faced song tunes and shit-faced Shakespeare, and this year they're doing shit-faced Pirates of Penzance.
Good golly.
Yes, quite. Which I haven't seen, I must say. I saw last year's shit-faced song tunes, and the idea, it's an improvised piece actually, where 3 or 4 actors go off performing songs, and one of them is supposed to have got drunk beforehand and therefore can't hold the note and goes around being a lively drunk during the show. But it's actually an improvised piece. I don't want to break it here. No one is drunk. But he is the... What do you call it? The... Well, he is 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 the... Well, he was the musical accompanist, musical director of that show. And I've also seen him in improvised musicals a few years ago before that. He's a very funny man, so I think of him almost as a comic first. He's obviously a musical comic. But because I associate him with improvised music, I'm wondering what the creative process was for the score of this. Whether it's one of those... what I don't know is whether he was the composer.
Well, I can enlighten you on this one, actually.
Thank you,
He was not. Although I assumed at the time, similar to you, that actually he might have been.
Yes.
But in fact, I believe that the actor that was playing the Marquis, a guy called Cyril Davis,
Yes.
is himself a very accomplished pianist, and we get a little glimpse of that at the end.
We do, that's right. He sits down for one last song.
Yes, now I believe that he wrote the book and the music,
Oh, did he now?
and performs as Henry Paget. I did a little bit of research before doing this review, and he grew up himself on Anglesey and went into...
Which is the Marquis state, or Marquis,
exactly.
I don't know what the term is, actually.
No, island.
Well, no.
Domain.
I'm
Empire.
talking about the title.
Oh, I see.
He is the Marquis of, and therefore it's an earldom for an earl.
Ah,
Is it a
yes.
marquisate? It's not a marquisdom, is it? Anyway,
I don't know.
That's something I'll look up later.
Yeah. Well, he knew about Henry Paget from an early age and was fascinated by him. And so this show has grown out of that almost local knowledge
right.
of where Davis grew up. And I may be wrong, but as far as I know, he wrote the book and the music as well.
Well, he's a very, very talented man, and as you say, he's also able to get that character across. You know, he's picked up invisible traces to create a character that feels plausible and real.
I've got to say that actually, it's that much more creditable to his performance. I think that he, having written the thing, is able to play the main parts so well.
Yeah, it's a symbiotic link, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you may think that, okay, if you've written the show, perhaps someone else would be better to play it, but I think in this case it's absolutely spot on for that part.
Well, it's whether you can judge what you've written or can't judge what you've written, but I think he can. So yeah, I didn't know that, and I'm delighted to hear it, because actually there were no flaws in the performances at all.
No.
I think the chap playing the actor is fantastic as well, because a lot of the comedy rests on him, actually. I mean, it is that traditional theatre thing, actually, where you have one character who does not change who they are, the Marquis, around which other actors then play a series of characters. You have to have this kind of lodestone character, if you like. The actor, being an actor, I mean, you know, the conceit is in your face, is going to be playing all these other characters, as is the footman accompanist. I mean, I'm just going to mention a couple of points. I love this, when we're in performance on national tours, there's a fantastic song called How Do You Think It Went? And it's a trio. They're on the road, they're going to different places, and there's just one thing about it which I love. Each of them, all three of them, sing one after the other, how do you think it went? But they all put different emphasis on the sentence. So one says, how do you think it went? And how do you think it went? And how do you think it went? And I thought, actually, do you know, that's a jolly clever conceit for a song and a lyric. And just brings it just up above the ordinary into something rather special.
Well, they said very early on in the piece that we don't mean to challenge you. And I think you can be as challenged or as unchallenged in this piece as you really want to be. A lot of the songs are so fast-paced, aren't they? I couldn't believe the articulation of the songs.
Yes, when I say this, I don't mean it's rudely. Beautiful diction.
Yeah, really. Thank you. But if you really listen to the lyrics, they're so cleverly written, and there's so many references and little side swipes at various things that it's not something that's just been thrown together at all. It's a very tightly put together thing.
And I'm just going to make one final comment, at least from my point of view. It's not connected with that per se, but it's the fact that actually we're back to the footman musical director again. He's a very, very tall man, very distinctive looking man, and he stands all the way through, which allows him better access as an actor. You know, it gives him an opportunity to then sort of detach himself from his keyboard, but it doesn't mean you have to have a high keyboard and a man standing playing for an hour, which is actually very impressive. It's quite a feat. Physically, it looks quite exhausting for the three of them.
Without any sheet music at all, by the way.
I noticed that. So he's learnt it.
Yeah.
Which presumably is where his improv skills come in, because he may be able to improvise on I don't know this, but he may be improvising on a theme in order to act as incidental and developmental music. So I think on the whole, we're very thumbs up on this, aren't we?
Oh, yeah. I did actually try to go back and buy tickets to see it for a second time, but it was sold out until I was going home, so... more's the pity, but at least they're getting sellout audiences, which is well deserved.
And lots of stars, not least from you.
Not least from me, so 5 stars from me.
And from me, as it happens. So.
Yeah, the only musical to get that from me this year.
Musical talk. Well, there you are, Broadway baby reviewer Josh Clark and me discussing How to Win Against History, which was up at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe again this year and was again excellent. Well, I think we're drawing to the end of this episode of Musical Talk, but do join us again next week when you'll be hearing some more of these shorter interviews that I conducted with people related to various great or enjoyable or wonderful or all three shows at this year's Edinburgh Festival Fringe. But before we finish today, I do think it's entirely appropriate to hear one more extract from Sue Ellaby's The Fringe Lozenge. In our conversation, she mentioned that she was desperate to have the Patience ending as the finale of her show, and also use Hail Poetry in a brand new way as Hail Cup of Tea, a sentiment I must say I thoroughly applaud, as the precursor to that. So, as we're at the end of this episode, let's hear the end, including those two songs from the Gilbert and Sullivan canon, reworked for the Fringe Lozenge. Goodbye.
And that's as far as I've got. You see, I'm stuck on this missing element. I can't do it without you, Arthur.
But Gilbert, it's obvious what's missing. I have just the melody.
Oh, hold on. It's not another of your fa-la-las, is it?
No, it hasn't got any fa-la-las in it.
Oh, good.
Let's all go inside for a hot drink. For what, I say, is life without a nice hot cup of tea in it?
Hail, cup of tea, when freshly made, now gild esteem the fringe's trade. Hail, flowing caffeine sediment, on hail, divine emollients.
So they let the flat twice over, how they switched it, we're in awe.
Moving in and moving out as we were going through the door. Only one Fringe pair we know of who could pull off such a switch. If you need some quick scene changes, guys, and mark are those you teach. If you need some quick scene changes, guys, and mark are those you teach. So we offer them the jobs he changes for. So go, go, go. It's all round a happy ending. We hope you've enjoyed the show. It's all round a happy ending. We hope you've enjoyed the show. It's all round a happy ending. We hope you've enjoyed the show.
This episode of Musical Talk, edited and presented by Thos Ribbits. Copyright Musical Talk 2017. Except for the songs, where the copyright remains with the creators. And my thanks go to Sue Ellaby for allowing me to use extracts of the Fringe Lozenge in this programme. To find out more about the world of Musical Talk and listen to past episodes, go along to our website www.musicaltalk.co.uk or subscribe to us on iTunes and follow us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can, at Musical Talk Thos.
I'm worrying when they're going to start doing their sound check, actually. We'll keep going until...
Yes, or we can go into the corridor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
We should keep going.
well, they've already started.
Yeah, they're a gospel choir. They're going to be really loud.
We'll hear them. I've done edits like this before. Are you okay sitting on a stair? Just the glamour of show business. Or would you like the seat?
No.
I feel so rude about dragging you up a staircase. As we know, the towers in Into the Woods are not supposed to have any.
No.
It's us blocking the stairs, not you. So.
Oh, of course, because they have
Yes,
a full house.
Of course they do.
Yeah.
Right. How long have we got, would you say?
Maybe like 5 minutes, but less.
Well, shall we try and get to... I'll try and release you into the wilderness. Will not people not be going up that stairs?
Should we go up here as the house is open?
Oh, fine, that's okay. As long as this is right for you,
Yeah.
I'm really sorry. Oh, I like to think we're ascending higher and higher, and literally we
Yeah, I'm
are.
not quite sure where we're going.
Yeah. This is the murder quarter.
This is a little bit of a country house.
Would you care to pick a stair? Fred Astaire. I hope you don't feel I'm underselling you.
No, when you said the favourite joke, I was thinking, oh, which one do I pick? But yes, I love that one as well. The groom himself was to be wedded just next week at Gretna Green. Gretna Green.
When they repeat it back to
I
each
like
other,
that,
yeah.
I thought that was, mind you, I shouldn't be laughing at my own jokes, should I? But the Gilbert's jokes, they just
I
twisted
think
really.
you should. I've never believed that thing. I think you've got to enjoy your jokes first if you want anyone else to enjoy them.
Yes, yeah. And the thing that made me do the show as well, I sketched it out and I sent a copy to Detty.
Yes.
And I said, just see what you think. And she ran and she said, I was having a cup of tea and I've just read Pooh Bah and laughed out loud and spilt my drink. And I thought, yes.
I have a room full of
I'll
people
go
doing
for
that
it.
and I'll be very happy. Right, I should turn this off.